Hey, Joe, welcome to the Virtual CMO podcast. Very glad you could join us today.
Yeah, thanks, Eric.
So we're going to get a chance to talk a little bit about virtual events today. Boy, you picked the right business to be in when COVID hit.
It's actually funny because when COVID hit, we really were not that heavily into this business, and we had to figure out how to adapt pretty quickly. But I agree with you; it has turned out to be a really good business to be in.
So a lot of what you're doing around virtual events was a pivot from where you were prior to COVID starting.
It's interesting. I wouldn't say a pivot, but we've always been focused on events and engagement, and that's really what our business is about, and our products are about. For us, when COVID hit, we had to adapt like everybody else. Our core product, 87% of our users were from field marketing, doing in-person events like regional events and dinners and lunch and learns.
Yep.
And we had to adapt quickly to help support them on virtual events. So that was the big change.
I live here in Orlando, Florida. This town is built on theme parks and convention business. And, it's been devastated, obviously, by the fact that all these in person conferences have been canceled. Now, things look like they're starting to warm up, especially in the second half of the year. Do you really feel that there's a pent up demand? Are you seeing that for in person events again?
Absolutely, there's a pin-up demand for in-person events. There's also a new awareness of the benefit of virtual events, and I think the future is going to be some combination of the two. Uh, I think in general, what we've learned in the past, 12 months that this has been going on is that virtual events are never going to be a substitute for in-person events. Not really,
Hmm.
because so much of what you want to do at in-person events you can't really do at virtual events. People don't just go to in-person events to learn. If you want to learn, you can pick up a book, or you can watch a YouTube video, or you can watch an interview such as this. There's a lot of different tools you can use if you just want the learning value. The reason that people go to events ultimately is the engagement that they get, the connection that they get while they're there. They want to build relationships, they want to build friendships. And so it's learning in that context. And virtual events have replicated some element of that, but not, nowhere close to the same experience as being in person. And but that being said, there's many ways that virtual events are better than in-person events too. So there are trade-offs, obviously, to both, and
Yeah.
that's why I say I see the future going forward as really being, somewhat of a combination.
Yeah, you can't get that tote bag at the virtual event the same way you can at the in-person event, or stand in line at the buffet waiting for the somewhat marginal food. Those are the kind of experiences that you miss. But I agree, I did events for a long time, and there's no better place really to have those one-on-one conversations than when you're with somebody personally. And I would agree that we're going to a hybrid model. So I think, for this audience, it would be great to take a little bit of a step backwards and talk a little bit about the evolution of virtual events and how we got to where we are today. I remember years ago, there were platforms like On24 and others, and they had created something like a 3D rendering where you would sort of meander through using your avatar, and it was clunky and it was slow and it wasn't very compelling at all. Where, were virtual events, and where do you see the technology today, and where do you sort of see it going?
It really reminds me of the early days of the internet,
Yeah.
where the first thing you had before search engines was you had directories,
Mhm.
and directories were basically bringing your yellow pages online, and that's what's happened with the first wave of virtual events. There's been a lot of these attempts to physically recreate the experience of being in an exhibit hall,
Yes.
but obviously to do it in a recreate that physical experience in a virtual way. Look, I've been to some events like that, and I have to say that some of the new technology, especially things like VR,
Mhm.
really do make those experiences interesting and possibly even compelling. the big question for me is, when are we going to see Major League Baseball start to adopt these things, right? I think it's just a perfect analogy, because what we're seeing is just that, whatever happens in things like entertainment, where they're producing these large scale live events, the business events are going to lag that, right?
Sure.
Professional events are going to lag that because of the audience. They can't reach and segment the audience in the same way historically using mediums like television. And so they haven't adapted as quickly as, something that has an audience of, millions or tens of millions of individuals can do. So, I think the experience going forward is going to be a lot like, going to a Seahawks game, or in your case maybe a Buccaneers game, uh, depending on whether you're
Yeah,
depending
I'm
on
glad you
your
didn't say Magic. We don't talk too much about them.
uh-huh
Yeah.
uh-huh uh you know going to a professional sports game, you have options, right? You can attend in person, and you can, buy the $12 beers, and you can buy the $200 tickets and sit in the stands, and you get that kind of experience. Or you can watch it on your television, on your couch, from the comfort of your home, or you can watch the highlight reel on ESPN later.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be very similar type of experience for in-person events in business, transitioning over to support these additional mediums where you can watch it from your office, you can watch it from a hotel room, you can watch the highlight reel later on demand. And so we really see everything moving to that offline, online, on-demand paradigm.
So a couple of examples come to mind based on what you said there. So obviously, during the early stages of COVID, we had the NBA bubble here in Orlando. They did the games. They had, a virtual audience set up so that, there were screens in the stands, and, fans could put a placeholder there to show that they were supportive. So they were really trying to recreate that virtual experience to bring the fans in, to make it exciting for them. And the second one that comes to mind is what Tony Robbins has done with his events. He would get tens of thousands of people to show up for his events, and now he's created this studio that literally has thousands of people on these little screens all around him, so that he can feel the interaction of the audience, and the audience can participate with him. But it's all virtual now. They're all sitting at home instead of in an arena or something. Other examples come to mind of what you think are some stellar virtual events that have been put on so far?
One example I really like has been what Drift has done with their Rev Growth series. And the reason that I like this is I've felt for a long time, even way before COVID, that there was this huge content investment that companies were making. And when you think about producing an event, whether it's a Tony Robbins event, or whether it's a baseball game, or whether it's a CMO roundtable, the challenging part is the content, right?
Sure.
Creating great content is not easy. Companies and event producers invest millions of dollars into these events sometimes to produce the content. They hire speakers, they fly them out, they put them in 5-star hotels. They go to all this trouble with production and lighting and everything else. And a lot of times they're even capturing this stuff digitally. They are recording it, or they are at least, rebroadcasting it up onto a bigger screen or something in the conference hall, things like that. But the model that has worked really, really well has been TED, and they've done it for years.
Yeah.
With taking the content that they produce at TED and putting it online. That's why people know what TED is. Not because TED's a really successful conference, but because TED has done a great job at creating content. Their conference is a venue for creating that content. It's a way that they produce it, and then they take it and put it online and make it accessible to other people. Putting it online, that on-demand component of the content for TED, is where all of the value comes from, for most people. Most people will never get to go and sit in a TED conference, but they can watch just about any talk online. So that's what I think the future is going to be, really. is going to be companies capturing and doing more with the content that they're creating, that they're investing so much money to create, that CMOs are going to realize, wait a second, we're spending $500,000 to produce this conference, and we're walking away from it with, a bunch of good feelings, and everybody's happy. But are we actually walking away from it with a lasting asset, that we can continue to build on?
Yes.
And that's what I see that digital transformation of conferences going towards. Yeah, and not just conferences. I mean, we think, this is going to happen even more with other types of virtual events like webinars, where we already see this happening. We're producing thousands of these things a year, not producing them, but they're hosted on our platform. So it's pretty obvious to see where the future is going.
So explain to our audience why a virtual event is really different than a webinar or a series of webinar. What really brings that virtual event to life? Because I agree with you, content is king, right? You've got to have good content, but the technology matters too. We're in an era where people are getting a little zoomed out. How does a virtual event take that to the next level?
So we think of virtual events as a big tent. There's a lot of things that can happen under virtual events. Webinars are one example. Virtual roundtables are another example. Virtual conferences are maybe the big example, right, on the far end. There are platforms that support all range of different type of experiences, right? You might even say that something like a StreamYard is a type of virtual event on the very low end, where what it's
Sure.
doing is broadcasting across LinkedIn Live and things like that. Those can be, the guy standing in the street doing magic tricks is kind of an event, right? So that's the online equivalent. In terms of how this plays out for companies and thinking about their content strategy, which I think is kind of what you're getting at, I don't see a lot of purely virtual conferences going forward. I see a lot of in terms of virtual events, what we believe the future is going to be better investments in webinars and possibly multi-session single day type of experiences. I think it's very hard to ask somebody to spend 2 or 3 days in front of a computer
Sure.
watching and interacting with your virtual conference the same way that they would spend 2 or 3 days in a hotel interacting with your in-person conference. So
Yes.
so I just don't see that paradigm continuing. What I do see continuing is when companies are producing their in-person events, that they have a better understanding now of the value of capturing that content, streaming it, putting it online, ultimately, making it available on demand, and building a library of those assets that they can store and share, and even that they can give personalized recommendations to people who are interacting with them about the type of things that they might want to interact with. That's what we see as the future.
It's interesting because I know in events from the past, I think one of the tools really that event organizers use is, they basically are locking you in a room, right? They're holding you hostage. You don't want to be rude and get up in the middle of a presentation and leave. And so the
That doesn't
quality
mean
of
it online at all. Online, you're one LinkedIn live stream competing with 100 other things that person could engage with, and you're
That's right.
one tab on their browser. And if your browser is anything like mine, it probably has about 20 tabs open at any given time. So, capturing that attention is really tough. I think it's going to be a lot more about, bite-sized content, things that are 10, 15 minutes long, the highlight reel,
Mhm.
that you can put online.
Well, I was going to say too that it does put the focus on content, really making great content that people are going to want to stay engaged with for the full session. And I think it also creates this great evergreen content. A lot of presentations at conferences, they're one time and one time only, right? If you're not there to see it live, you don't see it because they can't afford to film every session that's going on. So a lot of that content gets lost. but I think these tools provide you a way of creating more evergreen content. And as you say, you can break it up into shorter pieces that's a little bit more digestible to folks. Do you see that really as a trend as well?
100%. Yeah, I think that uh, the competition right now is, again, like I said, for engagement,
Yeah.
right? The awareness is basically a saturated channel at this point, right? The marketing of more that some people like Matt Hines talk about is it's a bygone era, right? Um, the future is going to really be defined by companies that can drive engagement with their customers and with their buyers. And that engagement is, it's up to them, right? You can put out whatever you want. The buyer has to choose to engage with you. And that choice, you have to give them a reason to choose to do that. The quality of the content is really everything. And so, the platform can make a huge difference in terms of the quality of the content that you're producing, right? That's what we've seen, with our platform. We've had customers that talk to us and say, gosh, I've been doing webinars for years and I switched over to your platform and all of a sudden I doubled the number of leads I was getting per webinar. Like, why is that? It's because the platform itself, the whole experience is part of that engagement. It's not just, a video where I'm talking to you, but it's, can we chat? Can we do polls? Can we, create an interactive experience that makes, people want to engage with that? It does go beyond just, having a great speaker, although that never hurts.
Have you seen in the webinars that you've helped produce, have you seen a sort of a leveling across the year? Or have you seen, when COVID started, that webinars really took off, and then as people fatigued a little bit, they started to drop in terms of their attention? What have you seen in terms of metrics?
Well, we hosted over 4 million attendees on webinars last year.
Wow.
So we have quite a bit of data about this. Uh, the thing that we've seen is the trend has continued in terms of people attending more webinars, but the competition has also increased.
Mm-hmm.
So people do want to move away from platforms like Zoom or GoToWebinar or things like that they don't feel are very engaging or that they feel are not differentiated. We're hearing from a lot of CMOs that they want to create, branded experiences, that they want to really control end to end the experience that the attendee has within that webinar. And but the big thing is just companies, have a bigger fight ahead of them in terms of that differentiation and standing out. In the in-person world, it was a little bit easier because you could kind of buy your way in. It was easier for some companies, right?
Yeah.
For companies that had a lot of money. If you were a big Fortune 500 company, and I'm not disparaging them, we have a lot of Fortune 500 customers, but it was easier for them because they could say, oh, well, we're just going to have a steak dinner and invite 40 people to it
Yeah.
at, a Michelin starred restaurant. And, it's a great approach, honestly. If you have a lot of money, like that will draw people in. The virtual events have really leveled the playing field. You can't do that anymore. You can't have these, exorbitantly produced events anymore that, where the event itself is the draw and the content is kind of secondary. And so, companies these days really have to think about the engagement and the platforms and everything that goes into it in a bit more detail.
I hadn't thought about it that way, but you're right. I think it really does level the playing field quite a bit. If you're a big company and you have big sponsorship dollars, you can slap your name on a lot of different things, but you don't have the same visible physical presence that you maybe would at an in-person event. It gives the smaller guys more of an opportunity to stand out, which I think is great. And from a cost perspective, I would think that the costs are considerably less than a virtual event. If you're spending $15,000, $20,000 to have a small sponsorship, a 10 by 20 at at some convention, I would imagine that same, $20,000 buys you quite a bit in the virtual event space.
I think you can produce, an entire year's worth of webinars for most companies for the price of, one large booth at, at a national conference, right? I mean, these booths can run to the $50,000 or $100,000 range.
Sure.
So, setting aside the cost of the people, but just in terms of the cost of the technology and the sponsors and everything else, you really can stretch your dollar much further. I think it's a huge opportunity for marketers. People look at it like it's been a big challenge, but much in the same way that regulation helps big companies stay in business and keep small companies out of business. Marketing is the same way in some ways, right? Awareness for a long time was the defining factor in which companies would win. And if you were Coca-Cola and you could buy more ad space, then you would ultimately have the winning product. It's not like that anymore. We've moved past the era of opens and clicks and eyeballs as being the defining metric of success for marketing, and we've moved to an era of 70% of buyers have fully educated themselves now before they ever have an interaction with a sales rep, and about half of them have already made their purchase decision before they have the first interaction with a sales rep. So what that means is just driving awareness is not enough anymore for marketers. Marketers really have to, in many ways, take on a lot of the responsibilities of educating their customers that sales has been doing for the last 100 years.
Very true.
And so now we're adapting to that, and it is leveling the playing field for many small companies, where all of a sudden just because you have a giant sales force doesn't make as much of a difference as it used to. You have 1,000 sales reps versus a startup that has 2. Well, guess what? You both just have one website. You both just have one YouTube channel. You both just have one opportunity to engage your buyers. And so it really is, yes, it is a challenge for marketers, especially in the enterprise, to adapt to this. But it's also a huge opportunity, because the companies of the future are going to be the ones who really succeed at engaging their buyers. And the real winners here are the rest of us, right? The professionals who are out there, who are trying to get educated and trying to learn and make good decisions, and see new techniques and approaches and things like that. Professionals are really the winners of this war here, because everyone is trying to provide value to the professional. And so I just see that trend continuing to escalate from here.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think based on what you've said and what I've seen in the marketplace myself, it just seems like engagement is going to be such a critical factor going forward. I think this era of Zoom calls where people are on there, they're participating. You look at the success that a product like Clubhouse has had recently. That's not new technology, right? It's just technology that's been repackaged, but it's all about people engaging as opposed to just listening to static content. And when I think about webinars or events, I think about the ability to really get involved, to get engaged, to share in that content in some ways. And that seems to be what this technology is going to enable going forward.
Absolutely. It's about a lot more than just, is this a conference, or is this a virtual conference? Is this a virtual webinar? Is this Clubhouse event? It's about a lot more than that. It's about engagement. And I think the companies of the future, in terms of MarTech at least, are going to be the companies that provide those platforms that power those type of engaging experiences.
And, as we're sort of coming to the close of our podcast here today, I'd really like to learn a little bit more about your platform in particular and the kinds of things that you do to enhance webinars and facilitate virtual events.
Sure. Well, Banzai is a MarTech company. We're really focused on this emerging idea of engagement marketing. And, as I said, the idea is that buyers today are educated before they ever show up to have a conversation with sales. And so, whereas before, marketing just owned the awareness layer of the funnel, just trying to drive leads into a sales funnel, today the sales funnel has really become, in many ways, a marketing funnel.
Sure.
Marketing, now owns the engagement and the consideration phases of the buying process. And in many ways, sales has become order takers. Now, that's not 100% true, and it's not true in every category. And certainly there are many talented sales folks out there. It's not a reflection at all, actually, on the talents or skills of salespeople at all. I think actually it's much more challenging to be a great salesperson today than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
In many ways, it's just a reflection, on the way that the buyers are changing their perspective. At Banzai, our mission is bringing that human connection back to marketing, where it was lost in the past to eyeballs and open rates and the marketing of more and the marketing of metrics, right?
Right.
And so our products, we basically have products focused on three areas. One is the engagement, helping companies drive more engagement through their virtual events, through their hybrid events, hybrid conferences, through their webinars. And we have a phenomenal webinar product called Demio, which is the #1 rated webinar product out there. And it's designed specifically for marketers. You can think of the difference as, a product like Zoom or GoToWebinar or WebEx. They're not really marketing products. They're designed for meetings.
Yeah.
And they're designed to be meeting products. And somebody said, hey, let's put a webinar feature on the side of this. What we're doing is building products from the marketer first, right? And from the attendee or the audience experience first. And so it's a totally different type of experience. And I encourage everybody to go, take a look at our website. You can find that product at demio.com. And then, our the rest of our business really about the data and helping marketers understand what's going on with their audiences and with their engagement. And it's about the marketing automation behind that. So, how do we drive more targeted, focused audience? How do we discover that audience? And how do we tap into that audience and engage with that audience in a very tailored and a very focused and targeted way? And so that's what our Reach product is about doing. And so that's again used by companies that range from startups to the Fortune 500. But the idea is really simple. We unlike a normal webinar where you post your event online and wait for somebody to come find it, Reach does the opposite. You put an event in Reach, and Reach will go out and figure out the audience that's best suited for your event and invite them proactively. And it'll automatically do things like follow up with them to make sure that they attend, send them the on-demand content, track their engagement across it. So you understand as a marketer, who the right audience for you is and how they're engaging with you. And so that's really what we're about as a company, is just driving more of that engagement. And in the future, we're going to invest more in other types of engagement marketing that we think fit that trend.
I love everything you said there, because it's really from the standpoint of a marketer, just like you said. And so many of these products, the other webinar platforms, you're right, they're just for meetings. They're terrible for webinars. And you see people fumbling all the time. How do I share my screen? And is this working? And it's embarrassing how bad some webinars can be, because the technology ends up being a hindrance, and obviously not many branding opportunities either. So that's great. I will make sure that we have links to all that in the show notes. If you would just tell everybody where they can find you online, and we'll make sure to get all that linked up.
Yeah, great. You can follow me on Twitter at JP Davy, Davy. And the same thing on LinkedIn. I'm linkedin.com /in/Joe Davy. And I post most of my updates there. And, I'll obviously follow Banzai is Banzai_IO or Banzai.io.
Hey, that's great. Like I said, we'll make sure to have all of that in the show notes. Joe, this has been great. I've really enjoyed talking to you today, learning more about your platform, learning more about what you view the future of virtual events and interactive webinars. It's all about engagement and content. That's what I'm walking away with today. And those are two hot button issues for me and my clients as well. So I think we're all on the same page. This is great. I really appreciate your time today.
Great to talk with you, Eric.
Thank you again.